Hi, I'm Matt.
And I'm Andrew.
Welcome to Waiting with Love. As always, this is a fellowship-style space for people navigating the messy in-between that comes with waiting. Whether you're waiting for a child, as we are, or waiting for something else, we want you to know that you don't have to wait without hope, and you don't have to wait alone.
This is
This is,
especially true when that waiting has lasted longer, hurt more, or changed you more than you expected.
if you've ever felt stuck in the middle of something you desperately want, you're in the right place.
Thank you for being here. All right. Well, welcome back, everyone. As always, thank you for following and subscribing to our Substack, listening to the podcast. Please leave a review, all the stuff. We really appreciate it all. So, Matt, a couple of weeks ago, you were 39, but besides that, you were also we were also discussing. Sorry, a little jab. Loving jab. We were also discussing insensitive questions, why they're insensitive about the adoption or surrogacy process or fertility process, better ways to frame those questions or alternatives you could ask, and we got a lot of good feedback. And so we talked about potentially considering doing another episode on more. So that's what we're going to do today. And last time we kind of kept the questions mostly on process. So like, why is the process taking so long? Why is the surrogacy company taking so long? Have you thought about adoption? Have you thought about stopping? Like those kind of process questions. This week, we're going to kind of change the focus and talk more about, I would say more future questions or future topic questions about maybe after the baby's born that we're still getting now, ironically, which think about it now unto itself is kind of rude because we have no baby, but here we are. Anyway,
Here we are.
Matt, here we are. Matt, would you like to ask the first question?
Sure. Not so much a question, but more of I'm going to call it an opinion. At least you can travel or sleep or save money.
Yeah, and we get combinations of that, right? Because now in fairness, we do have a travel blog, which does, I guess, invite people to make those statements. But we hear things like that all the time. Oh, two guys with making money with no kids. You guys must be living the life. Dinks, right? That's the word I was looking for. You guys get to travel. You guys can save for retirement. You don't have to worry about daycare. You don't have to worry about you don't have to worry about babies waking up at night. You guys get to sleep. You guys get to go out to dinner every night. All those different versions of the same point, which is basically at least you can do X, right?
Right. And I think that the sarcastic response would be, and you and I are both pretty sarcastic people, as anybody who knows us knows, would be, yes, that's exactly the trade we requested. We actually reached out to our higher power and said, could you hold off on the baby for a little bit because we really want to go to Africa or the Maldives or Thailand.
Right.
And I think that it's insensitive in a couple of ways. One, it reframes our current life and our current situation as a consolation prize. And I think number two, it assumes that we wouldn't trade everything that we're doing now for a baby, which simply isn't true. I mean, yes, we went to Africa last year, and we went to France last year, and we went to Italy last year. We did a lot of travel last year. But do you really think that Andrew and I wouldn't have traded all of that in the world for a chance to have a baby?
Yeah, except for the France trip. That was different.
Except for the France trip. That was to see family.
That was to see family, right, exactly. But Italy, Africa, yeah, exactly. The Maldives. Actually, no, not the Maldives, because that's actually how we found the boy, but that's a different topic for a different day. But you all get the point, basically. Right. You don't think we would trade all these different things for what we've been working on for almost our entire married life, right? Adult life. So, and as Matt said it, what people are not doing on purpose, of course, what they're doing, though, is you're kind of minimizing the longing we've been having, the hurt we've been having, and again, not on purpose, of course, but that's the unintended consequence. So I think a better way to say that, because yes, living it's a delicate balance. That's why we're having this episode and these conversations. Because right, the worst thing Matt and I could do is just stare at a wall all day and be, oh, woe is me
Miserable.
about all this, right? Right, and
Yeah.
be miserable. So you want to live your life. You want to live in the present. We do love traveling. We do have get a lot of joy out of that. So I think it's more, and again, not a question, but more of a statement along the lines of, I or we, if you're two people, admire how the two of you have been able to still find ways to live while you're waiting. Um, doesn't make it easy, but we admire that you get to travel and do see the world. That's something that we've never been able to do. We admire what you and your foreign exchange student, that's the friendship, we're able to build together. That's something, that's special. You'll have that forever, no matter when the baby comes. Like there's ways to like validate without being insensitive.
Yeah, and I think, this as a travel agent. There are so many logistics that go into planning a trip, particularly an overseas trip. Now add a surrogacy or potential adoption into the mix. And we talked last week about, there may be progress that you don't know about being the person who's asking this question. Think about all of the factors that go into planning a trip overseas and then layer on top, well, what if we get picked by a birth mother and we're overseas? What if there's a pregnancy and something goes wrong during that pregnancy? I mean, it adds additional pressure. So on the one hand, yes, we're living our life and we've talked about no regrets, and traveling is absolutely, I think, a no regret for us. I mean, when we were thinking about the trip to Africa as an example, it was truly a once in a lifetime experience. And we had a window where we didn't believe that there would be progress or anything that would have impact our ability to go on that trip. But I think still by saying, "Oh, well, at least you get to travel or save money or sleep."
Well, and actually, man, I just thought of something. The context of Africa is important because a lot of people are focused on the pictures of the elephants and the lions and tigers and bears. Oh my, no bears. I was the only bear there, if you know what I mean. Um, but what you don't know is the reason we went on that trip is because we had a major
Yeah.
setback. That we're not prepared to talk about today. But like that trip was amazing. It was once in a lifetime, but it was not. When we decided to go on it, it was not due to
No,
happy
it
times,
it
right?
it truly was a consolation
It
prize.
was a consolation, exactly. So again, so glad we went. It was a wonderful time, but like that's the part you're not seeing for anybody for that matter. When you're seeing people cope in the present by doing different things and living their life and trying to balance, you're not
Yeah,
seeing that context. So when you make those statements, at least you get to go to Africa. Well, yeah, but I really wish I didn't because there'd be a baby here if I
right.
didn't get to go. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. Another favorite one. And there's a couple of flavors of this. One is truly a question of how much has this cost so far? But before we get to the question part, I really love this statement when people with kids, particularly straight couples who had kids naturally the old-fashioned way, say, "Do you have any idea how expensive kids are?"
Yeah.
let me tell you a thing or two,
Right.
because the number of zeros behind how much we've spent just trying to have kids is probably equal to, if not more, than you've spent on the kids that you had a cheap bottle of wine and 25 minutes in the bedroom to make.
Yeah, that's the part people don't see. I'm glad you thought of that because I didn't think about that. How expensive this really does cost. There is no college savings plan you get to pay into for 20 years, and then pay for college with it. There's
Mhm.
no besides the failed adoption tax credit, which you can use once, only for adoption if it failed. There's no getting any of this money back, whatnot. If you're blessed to work for a company that does provide those benefits for infertility, that's great, but most don't.
Mhm.
So yeah, and then of course, assuming we're successful or whoever's successful, all the costs that the traditional families who do the old-fashioned way, who bitch about costs, we still get to pay for all that stuff too. This
Right.
is just for us to get started. Maybe if we're even successful, if we're not successful, this is literally just money down the drain. Um, so
Yeah, I think of this question as, we just know that socially acceptable behavior is generally not to talk to other people about money. And it's just not a good question. Like
it's
there
not a good question.
truly
Yep.
there truly isn't a good alternative. The alternative is you shouldn't be asking.
And I think, I want to, because, our listeners all come from different backgrounds, financial backgrounds, but let's just keep it on us because all we could do is talk about us. What people don't see, and I'm not going to go too specific though, are, you see us doing surrogacy, you see us living in a nice house in Maine, money must be growing on trees for them. Well, you don't see all the loans we've had to taken out during our marriage for all these adoptions and all the surrogacies we've done. This is not just like we have all this money sitting in a bank account and we can just do surrogacy tomorrow like it's nothing. What you don't see is, money we're putting into surrogacy is not money we're putting into financial investments for our future financial future. So even though it might look like we're doing fine and they can afford surrogacy like Anderson Cooper, so they must be rich. You're not we're not Vanderbilts. We don't have we don't have the CNN primetime show. So we are very fortunate as we had levers we could pull that many people don't, and we're not oblivious to that. But like it's as Matt just said, it's a stupid question. Don't ever ask that money, no matter no matter what it is, unless it's about your specific household. How's that sound, Matt?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we can leave that one there.
All right. I think any same-sex couple that's tried to have kids or single parents who've tried to have kids have all experienced this one before, Matt, right?
Yep.
Who's the real dad? Who's the real mom? Which one is, if you're two men, which one is the more father figure? Which one's the more mother figure? That's not inappropriate or anything.
Right. I mean,
Um,
I think
yeah.
here the truly sarcastic response would be something like, we rotate weekly, there's a schedule, or something to that effect. But I mean, this is one of those questions that before you ask this question that it is deeply inappropriate.
Yeah.
And anyone who's asked this question, you take a second right now and think about the 5 seconds before you asked that and tell yourself you didn't believe that that was an inappropriate question at the time you asked it. Which doesn't mean that there isn't any validity to that question. I mean, if you're a child born of surrogacy, there are legitimate reasons that you need to know which of your two dads or your two moms you are biologically related to. But those are medical reasons. Those may be legal reasons. They may be financial reasons. But that is a deeply, deeply personal question that I think is between the parents and the child, and that is it. And maybe their doctor.
Well, and besides being nosy, what is the benefit of that question? Like, even like, because some of the other questions we talked about, especially last time we did this, which was, process questions, all those are coming from a good place. Why is it taking so long? What that friend and
Right.
family member's basically doing is, oh my God, this is taking forever. You guys must be struggling. Why is that happening? So it's coming from the right place, at least even if it's annoying. I feel like this question is not coming from the right place, Matt.
No, this question will never come from the right place. And I think the real answer here is, who is the real dad? When that day comes, we both are. And you know who kids respect as their parents? The people who show up for them.
Yep.
That's who they know as their parents. They've never,
I'll,
I mean, yes, our child will know two dads and no mother, but they'll always have known that from the day they're born.
we were,
And
yeah.
go
Okay,
ahead.
continue. I'm sorry. No, I was going to
I was
continue.
just going to say that's why this question will never come from a place of sincerity, unless
Yep.
again, if it's a doctor who's asking, that there's a valid reason for that. A doctor may want to know a medical history, which there is value in sharing with your doctor, but I don't think as a friend or even to some extent a family member there is ever an appropriate time to ask this question. And I do want to call out, the same is true for adoption.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's why I said any same-sex couple, any single parent, adoption, anything. Yeah, exactly. So a straight family, traditional couple, any, IVF, for all you know, they did surrogacy. You
Mhm.
just don't know. And besides being rude and nosy, there's no benefit from that question. I can't stop thinking, Matt, about Matt and I met another couple, on a vacation to Cancun many years ago, who were interracial, and they did surrogacy. They're a same sex couple, and they did surrogacy. And obviously the baby they had looked more like one than the other because they're interracial. And I remember the one who was not the biological father told us how hurt he was about that. That people would always make the comment about how that baby was obviously his. I think they were married, his husband's. And it's like, no,
Mhm.
they're the baby's both, but they literally had to scrounge for more money to do surrogacy again, so both of them could be biological parents. And I think they basically said a lot of the reason they did that was feeling like shit that one looked more like the other than the other. Like
Yeah.
I'll never forget that. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that story and that conversation well, and I think that's why this is just not a good question to ask. And we talked a couple of weeks ago when we did part 1 of this about process questions, and it goes back to one of the questions that you and I had kind of tossed back and forth, which is, well, have you thought about this? Of course we thought about this. I mean,
Right.
when you're going through surrogacy in particular, it's one of the first things you need to decide because one of you needs to sign legal paperwork. And yes, we had a method by which we used, and other people have their own, and some people do one of each. There are many different ways, but at the end of the day, I mean, Andrew and I will consider ourselves dads to any baby that is born to us
Or
and to
a
our exchange
16 year,
student.
I was gonna say, or to a 16-year-old French boy who has wonderful parents on his side. He now has 4 parents because yeah. Um, so right. It's like the money question. There's no reason to ask that question at all. That's not ill intent. So just don't ask that question. Okay. Hey Matt, we're 2 men. If you haven't noticed, what will you tell the future child about not having a mommy?
Probably the truth and some snacks. But even saying that sounds sort of silly because as I said just a few minutes ago, the baby is going to always know 2 dads. I mean, I'm not going to go down the path of explaining surrogacy, but in any realistic scenario, yes, we are eternally grateful to whatever surrogate ends up carrying our child to term. But the baby outside the womb is going to know the surrogate for 2 or 3 days max. They're never going to know any different. And I think that, I think, Andrew, you and I both came out later than many. And one of the things that we learned when we were coming out is the less of a deal we made of it, the less of a deal other people
Oh,
made of it.
he's talking about us coming out as gay, not coming out of our mother's wombs. Sorry, I took me a
Right.
second to get there. Coming out as gay. I'm sorry. I was like, wait, what? Oh, got it. Yes, coming out as gay. Sorry, Matt. Back to you.
A- And and I just think about that experience that we both had, and what lessons we learned were the less of a deal we made out of it, the less of a deal other people made out of it. And I think as it is age appropriate, number one, your child is always going to know they have 2 dads from the moment they start building core memories. But as and when it's age appropriate, I think you can have those conversations about why Johnny down the street has a mommy and a daddy, and your baby has 2 daddies. But I don't know.
No, I mean, and it's just like even kids born with traditional mom and fathers, or it's just and maybe the father is the stay-at-home father and the mother's the breadwinner, and they have to answer questions about that, or a single parent. What happened to the father? You got divorced. Why'd you get divorced? Like kind of like questions like money, or questions about who's going to be the real father. What is the intent of this question? What are you trying to get out of this question besides just being rude?
Yeah.
Right? What are you trying to get out of this one? Are you trying to tell us that we're going to be terrible parents because neither one of us have a vagina? I mean, is that what you're trying to tell
Mhm.
us? Like, yeah, I mean,
All
then
right.
why are we for? Yeah, sorry.
We'll move on.
Uh, let's move
Next
on.
question, Andrew. I love this one. We've talked a lot on here about even our shared experiences of updates always coming when I'm on calls, and people love to ask me this question: what are you going to do about work?
Yeah, there's a lot of like, let's kind of unpack this question because there's a lot of different things going on with this question. So, people who are close to us know Matt travels a lot for work. He's always on calls. I'm busy too, but my role is a little bit more flexible. So people like to ask about that. Um, and then on top of that, there's a lot of different things we need to, I mean, anybody needs to consider that makes our process even more, quite frustrating. We don't know when this is going to be successful, but when it is successful, that starts the countdown for 8 months. We have to go to, we have to go to another country for a few months. We have to, we can't really think too much about our careers. This is where it's hard. We have to kind of plan like for now, for the foreseeable future, that we are not parents and our focus, at work is not about being parents, but we can't also forget about it. It's very complicated. And then, of course, when the baby is born, as Matt was pertaining to, how are we going to balance being parents and also working full time?
Well, and there's an easy answer, the same way every other couple does.
Well, there you go. Right. Right. Um, it assumes like you're assuming we haven't talked about that at all. You're assuming like there's no plan. It also forces us to now dive into hypotheticals with you all about a future we don't even know is going to happen. We can't confirm if it's going to happen. We can't think about paternity leave or whatnot, or when that's going to be until we are, where it's similar to any pregnancy is until we're pregnant. But what's different is we don't know if and when that's ever going to happen. So it just highlights all the other instabilities we're experiencing while we're in this process. And again, it's kind of like the question we talked about 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago now about, did you do your research on the right adoption agency or the right surrogacy agency? You're just
Mhm.
assuming we're just complete idiots and haven't talked about this. Like, there's no plan. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah,
Well, and I think to that point about work, obviously we've talked about it. We have obviously talked about what maybe stays the same, what maybe changes when, if and when we do become parents. But I also think, kind of tying back to one of the first questions of, well, at least you can do X, Y, or Z, like travel while you're waiting. I think this is also true of work. I mean, we talked about this last week a little bit in my 40th birthday episode, but one of the advantages of being older going into this process is we've had the opportunity to be a little bit more stable in our career. And we're not trying, I mean, of course, we're trying to climb the corporate ladder. Who isn't? But we're not on the bottom rungs of that ladder anymore.
yep,
So
yeah. I
I
mean,
think a
yep,
better
yep.
alternative to a type of question like this is just acknowledgement. You two are thoughtful planners. You literally are project managers for a living. I'm sure you've thought about this, and I'm sure when the time comes that this becomes a challenge or not for you, you'll figure it out,
Like every other parent, exactly.
like every other parent.
So I think we've done enough questions like this for over 2 episodes. So I think the big things we want to hit as we wrap up. Again, this is not to make fun of people for asking questions or to make you feel bad about asking questions. It's more about, especially for those of you who are listening who are not in this process but want to support people who are in this process. It's really trying to take, what can you take from this so you can provide that support that you desperately want to give, which makes you all good people. And that's basically listening instead of questions goes a long way. It's
Yeah.
providing people a space to express how they're feeling. So validating, saying you understand, or, you can't imagine what it's like, but I'm here for you, things like that. My door's always open. How are you two holding up in general? Like more like that goes a long way. Don't try to solve this for anybody. You can't. There's nothing you can do to solve this for anybody. There's no advice you can possibly give that people going through this haven't thought of already. Unless you've been in the process, that's different. But if you haven't been in the process of like, they're going through, I wouldn't try to give advice unless somebody's specifically asking for you all. That's something we learned in Al-Anon, like in day one, is basically don't provide advice that people don't ask for.
Mhm.
Um, don't try to timeline it. Don't try to tell people, "Oh, it's going to work out when it works out, or it'll work out soon." Like, you don't know that. And that's why, again, don't try to provide solutions. You don't have any, not your fault. Don't try to be their therapist. You're not a therapist. Not your fault. Just try to be a place where somebody can feel comfortable speaking to you. And that's when you'll learn. And then for those of you who want to learn more about their process, you'll learn more by doing that too.
Yeah, I love that. And I think just as we close out, I want to speak to the people who are going through this process. And as we said before on this podcast, we understand this journey through shared experience. We know what you're going through. We know how difficult some of these questions can be to answer and the pressure to answer. And on top of all of the pressure that you're already feeling along this journey. So, as always, Andrew and I are here if you need somebody to talk to, or in a similar fashion as what we're doing. Feel free to point your loved ones or the people that maybe you're struggling with their questions. Send them link to part 1 and part 2 and say, look, I think our relationship would be a lot better if you just listened to, total is going to be about 60 minutes worth of a podcast about how to support me or us going through this process. Cause I
And we haven't,
definitely,
yeah. And we haven't talked too much about it besides here and there, but for those of you who have parents, for example, who might not be podcast people, we also have the website where there's a Substack, and we turn most of these podcasts into a written like essay.
mhm.
So if for those of you who have parents or just people in your lives who are not podcast people but like to read, we also have that too. So please sign up for the Substack.
All right, let's leave it there. Thank you for being here. If this episode resonates with you, please consider sharing it with someone who might need to know that they're not alone.
You can find more about us and this community at www.waitingwithlove.com.
And links to our socials, as always, are in the show notes.
Until next time, keep waiting with love.